What America voted for was America first, and transgender operas in Chile isn't exactly America first. And to say that USAID was
simply... You've said a lot of words, but you've said nothing. You haven't addressed the Constitution, the Supreme Court cases, the Impoundment Control Act.
Sam Seder destroyed MAGA clowns live on Piers Morgan's show, and they were not ready for the reality check.
None of that. You can say that you don't think it's right to feed starving children in Africa. That's your prerogative.
In a panel packed with right-wing talking points and desperate spin, Sam Seder came in armed with facts, receipts, and that signature calmness that makes his takedown so brutal.
Can we address the feed starving children?
Donald Trump, I can't believe you're going with the starving children. You're going with the starving children.
No, it does. I mean, it does other things that you don't like.
All right, let me.
But it also does this.
Allow the lady in the room.
As Piers Morgan scrambled to defend MAGA nonsense, Sam cut right through the noise, exposing the absurdity of their arguments in real time. So let's dive right into it and watch him dismantle MAGA propaganda piece by piece.
What America decided in 2024, in a landslide and with the popular vote, the whole of the American people decided to vest a single man, Donald Trump, to hunt down waste, fraud, and abuse.
It all started when Sam Seder appeared as a guest on Piers Morgan's show, where he found himself in a debate with Jillian Michaels and far-right commentator Benny Johnson. The discussion quickly turned into a heated back and forth about government audits, financial efficiency, and the ways in which taxpayer money is allocated.
You, I think, posted that the idea that Doge is in any way about efficiency is absolutely a joke. They're not doing an audit. They're destroying the apparatus of our government. What do you base that on?
What made this debate particularly intense was the way in which each participant had a completely different interpretation of what constituted wasteful spending, what was legally permissible, and who truly benefited from government decisions.
Audits are done regularly of agencies by inspector generals. The first thing they did was to fire all those inspector generals and not replace them. A. B. Audits that lead to firings within a couple of days are obviously not being done. The notion that this is about efficiency when you're laying off thousands of IRS agents, when it is well known that every dollar spent at the IRS returns for the government $6 or $7, you're clearly not talking about efficiency here.
Sam wasted no time pointing out that the claim of efficiency being the driving force behind these supposed audits was laughable.
Measured in any other way other than allowing wealthy people to get away with cheating on their taxes.
In his view, what was actually happening was a planned effort to weaken government oversight. He argued that true audits require transparency, accountability, and due process, none of which were evident in the current political landscape.
I mean, I could go on, but there's absolutely no evidence that there's a single audit going on. To the extent that they've saved any money, it has been largely dismissed as clerical error.
Instead of conducting genuine audits, the administration had fired inspector generals, refused to replace them, and pushed out thousands of IRS agents, which ultimately made it easier for the wealthiest individuals and corporations to evade taxes.
You can determine that you can have an opinion that it's squandered. I can have an opinion that it's squandered, but it's been appropriated by the Congress.
Piers Morgan pushed back, bringing up examples of wasteful spending that had been exposed, suggesting that these revelations justified the budget cuts. Sam, however, was quick to challenge this logic.
In America, we have actually both statutory, constitutional, and court cases that say the President of the United States and the executive branch cannot decide unilaterally that they're not going to appropriate money that Congress has appropriated.
He emphasized that while people might have different opinions on what constitutes wasteful spending, there were legal and constitutional processes that determined how money was allocated.
You may think that some of the spending is not worthy. I may think it's not worthy. But that's just not the way our government works.
Jillian Michaels, who had been listening intently, jumped in, expressing her frustration with the way government spending was being handled.
Because it doesn't seem that the government is working. As a layman, when the USAID is exposed.
She insisted that Americans were just now discovering the extent of some of these expenditures and that much of this information had been hidden from the public.
Fashion that it has been, and all of a sudden we have this transparency that we've never had in my lifetime.
None of this stuff was hidden at all. None of this stuff was hidden at all.
Sam immediately pushed back on this narrative, pointing out that none of this information had ever been truly hidden. Government spending records were always accessible to those who were interested in looking them up.
So you're telling me that the average American knew that we were funding friggin' operas for trans people in who knows where?
If the average American was interested in what USAID was supporting, they could have just gone to the website.
Do you really believe that?
The idea that Elon Musk and his team had somehow discovered this information was misleading. They had simply amplified certain aspects of it to serve a specific ideological agenda.
Really believe that people knew this and this was common knowledge. And there's no question that some of this...
This wasn't about uncovering secrets, it was about cherry-picking details to create outrage.
Find it, they publicized it.
Well, exactly.
This was the crux of the issue. Conservatives like Benny Johnson love to frame their arguments as America first, claiming that they wanted to focus government spending on helping people domestically rather than funding programs abroad. But Sam saw right through this. In reality, they weren't interested in spending money on struggling Americans either. They didn't want funds going to healthcare, education, or food assistance programs. The only thing they truly cared about was maintaining tax cuts for the wealthy and gutting any government initiative that helped ordinary citizens. Sam drove his point home by suggesting that if these right-wing commentators truly cared about using tax dollars wisely, they would advocate for cutting military spending, which accounted for an enormous portion of the federal budget.
Starving in Africa, when really, it is about billions of dollars going to big ag. That's what that's really about. And I've seen it firsthand when I went to South Sudan and stayed at a refugee camp.
Instead, they focused on minuscule cultural programs while ignoring the billions poured into defense contracts, often for weapons that the military itself didn't even request. What really stood out in this debate was the way in which conservative commentators constantly shifted the goalposts. When discussing tax cuts for the wealthy, they argued that people deserve to keep more of their money. But when it came to funding social programs, suddenly they demanded extreme scrutiny over every penny spent.
It's not just USAID. I don't like them cutting the IRS. I don't like them cutting the EPA. I don't like them cutting Labor Department. I don't like them cutting the National Labor Relations Board. I don't like them cutting the FDA.
Do you like the level of USDA?
By the end of the discussion, Sam had effectively debunked the right-wing narrative. While his opponents tried to spin the conversation into one about exposing corruption, he made it abundantly clear that what they truly wanted was an excuse to gut essential programs. And as history has shown time and time again, when you strip funding from these programs, it's not the rich who suffer, it's the everyday Americans who rely on them for survival. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one.